Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
Why have we strung a lot of dreary days together?
Yes, we have.
One.
It's sort of interesting so far because it teases cold weather, but it doesn't.
Right.
Yeah, but it has. Whenever you have the rain and this kind of cold, there's something about it that gets to your bones in a way that even the very cold doesn't.
Right. There's a humid chill or something. Anyway.
Yeah. I was really moved by that, Rabbi Dweck. Yesterday, it's like you get like a brief moment with somebody and you want to spend more time with them. He really was an interesting guy.
Is he here for a particular reason, just doing a tour of the States?
I don't know, he was in the States for some, he knew about this for a couple months because somebody contacted me several months ago about this trip. And he was going to be in Chicago. He's just in Chicago for one day.
Huh.
He went to HTC, he went to Northbrook, and then he went to Anshe Shalom at night. And that is because the guy who was the contact wanted it to be that way, I think. But he was he's a very interesting guy. He's an American, but you can see his affect is very European now. I don't know.
Oh, is he based in London?
Yeah, he's in London. His title is Senior Sephardic Rabbi of the United Kingdom. It's called the Spanish and Portuguese Community of the United Kingdom. He himself is Syrian. He's not Spanish or Portuguese, but they're all from Spain and Portugal, I guess, at one point. Although, I don't know if they are, when you're talking about Syria, they may not be. They're certainly influenced by the Minhagim, but Syria, those communities, especially Aleppo, it's a very old community. It's before Spain. But who knows if, where the people actually came from. But his name is Dweck. The minute I heard the name, I knew he had to be Syrian because my son Moishi learned in a Syrian yeshiva in high school, and then in Beis Medrash. My Tzipi is Syrian, is from Aleppo. I mean, she's not from Aleppo, but her family is. So, and Moishi was our one child.
Wasn't that was it in Philadelphia? It wasn't.
It was in Deal, New Jersey. New Jersey.
Right, Deal.
It's not far from Philly. I mean, but it's Deal, New Jersey.
No. Right.
Yeah. So, and his Rosh Hashiva's name was Dweck, and there were a lot of Dwecks there. And there's a very interesting woman. She has this great cookbook of food from Aleppo, and her name is Pupa Dweck. So that Dweck as a Syrian name. So the minute I heard the name, I assumed he was Syrian, which he is. So he was born in LA, of all places. He was educated in New York and I think Israel, and for sure New York. I'm pretty sure Israel too. Yeah, because he's married to a granddaughter of Rav Avad Yosef.
Oh, how old is he? Young?
Yes. Yeah, he has an actual Wikipedia page, believe it or not.
I just, he's like youngish, 40 through 50.
Well, I mean, his picture is very young
yeah, but you saw him in person.
Yeah, he doesn't look as young as he does in the picture. So it says here he's 47.
Okay, young.
But he is, so he doesn't have an English accent, but he does have a kind of European demeanor. But he spoke large, let's just say that. He had a grasp of it. Like there's some people who try to do it. in a kind of Rabbi Soloveitchik kind of way, or Rabbi Jonathan Sachs kind of way. They, there are people that try to speak large, but you can see they can't quite hold it. But he was holding it. He was holding it, and he was holding it with follow-up questions and just some discussion. So it was a large thought. Plus, it was something. His main topic was something a subject that I've been working on in my own, my own avoda, my own personal service. So that was part of what might have struck me. But then even this little detail, it was really just a detail from it was part of how he's developing his idea. It wasn't the point of his thing. And the minute, there was just something about it where there was things like that in the Torah where they have where people are always wondering, like when Moshe hits the rock, is that a reason for somebody to not be able to go into Eretz Yisrael? Or these kind of things where it's always sort of a little annoying around the edge, and there's something more going on. And then there was something about it that just gave me a glimmer into that this was a big deal. I remember with Moshe hitting the rock, I once read Rav Dessler says, to us, it may look like it was a small thing. It wasn't a small thing. But usually when you hear that, you're hearing they get tested under a microscope and they're looked at under a microscope. God is much more demanding of people in that situation. So even though, truthfully, it is a small thing, but they get punished for small things. But Rav Dessler was like, no, that's not. Rav Dessler said, this was a deep breach between him and God. We're not part, he had a relationship with God. We know something about the relationship with God, but not a lot, not enough to understand why this was such a breach. But God was furious. This is a deep breach. This would be like if you saw friends, you saw some friends that now are not talking to each other. And when you heard why they're not talking to each other, like to you, you're going, really? You're not talking to each other over that? But if you were in the friendship, you would understand why that thing mattered that much. There's certain things like that where it's
did
just.
Rabbi Dessler, did
he was
get
saying
that what that deepness was? No, just that it was a deep, yeah.
Right, but in other words, he wasn't going. He wasn't going in the way that this is just God looking under a microscope.
Right.
Holding people. He was saying, no, this was a terrible breach. God is furious with him. He did something that infuriated God. This was very serious. It's just, we're not part of that relationship. So we get a little something, and we see something happen there. But don't think that God is just not letting him go into Israel because he's super righteous, and super righteous people get judged on a different scale. It's not just that. It's that he really upset God deeply. And it had to, in this way, this thing with him having to spend 2 more years. It's not just, he got judged under a microscope. No, this is a real deep problem that needs to be addressed. And it just got like a little window of the tip of an iceberg, but it opened up there. But it wasn't just that allowed me to get that. I think he is sort of, he seems to be capable of profound thought. I only heard him speak once, but he has a friend who came with him. There was a friend who accompanied him on this trip, an English guy. And so I was talking to the friend, and he goes, no, he's got a lot of stuff like this. This is.
I always think that if it's Sephardic, it might be a little more mystical, but maybe that's
this was more psychological. It was like his main topic was what he was calling a kind of unification of the person. That, and the way he characterized it, and he's using language that is popularized by a man named Richard Schwartz. There's a guy, Richard Schwartz, who wrote a book I just wrote here. The guy, Richard Schwartz, because afterwards in the follow-up question, because he said he was talking about unification of your person, and that we have like different parts to ourselves, and you're looking for unity. And so I asked, do you have recommendations? And because he was just talking about generally, and then he was excited to say, yeah, I have several. So one of the things was this guy, Richard Schwartz, who amongst his books, he has something called No Bad Parts. But he has a kind of therapy, which he calls internal family systems therapy, which works with the assumption that people have different personalities within them, that you could characterize it in different ways. You could call it parts or personalities, but like sometimes it's experienced as voices, different voices. So if you gave a kind of persona to each one of those voices, so one of them might be a child, one of them might be a parent, one of them is an accusing, I don't know, authority figure. You know, you have like different, and so he was suggesting there were certain clues to him that Yosef at one point didn't have those voices anymore. It was like he had become a sort of integrated character, which is part of what allowed him to consistently apply himself to whatever was at hand, and not to become distracted, just to sort of consistently apply himself to what was at hand. When we speak of the term shlemus, sometimes as a goal, for our own personal avoda, we use the term shlemus, like wholeness. So he was suggesting that what we mean by that is sort of a kind of integrated wholeness, where we're no longer at the mercy of different voices or different parts to ourselves. The part I was working on before he even was speaking about this, just on my own, was just noticing that, let's say I make a resolution, I want to do something. So something as simple as I want to learn, let's say I say I want to learn a chapter of Mishnah every day. So it's a very specific goal, very doable, because it wouldn't take that long to do it, right? So it sounds reasonable. And yet I know from life experience that it's so unlikely that could happen. The everyday part, that I'll do it every day. It's just so unlikely, even if it's that simple. So you have the simplest of tasks. But I just know from life experience. So that was the part like I've been working on, like where's the gulf there? So when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking of it maybe chemically, I don't know. There's different hormones or different chemicals, and this day I'm affected this way, maybe like the Greeks with the humors, an imbalance of humors or something like that. I don't know, but sometimes I think of it like that I'm not feeling the same as I did on the day when I made the commitment. I'm just not feeling the same. And from the perspective that I'm feeling then, what looked so simple, what looked like it was just a baby step, is now a mountain. Something like that. So I'm just sort of following it along. And then, he's using language that may or may not work with this, but it was just sort of interesting. This idea, apparently, I'm sure every psychologist, Jung and everybody else, I'm sure this is something that many have already characterized in different ways, but the way he was talking about it was either parts or personalities. And that, so it's dangerous to grab onto either one too much, but let's say you were thinking personality. So today I'm this person, tomorrow I'm a different person. And I almost feel that way, like the commitment was made by somebody else, wasn't made by me. Because today I am a million miles from that commitment, and I'm looking at it like through a telescope. So, and so I guess, so again, he was suggesting that this is, you see this, there are a couple different, instances where he suggested that you could see from Yosef that he wasn't having this, and that this might be part of what is tzaddik. Because how does somebody reliably, because what is tzaddik? Tzaddik means that you're essentially always doing what is right. Correct action, right action. So if you're always doing what is right, so it's simple. Just it's not asking you to do what you don't know. Just do what you know. Just apply what you know to the situation and do what's right. Again, every once in a while you're not sure what's right, but for the most part we are, and so just follow through and do what's right. Then you would get the title tzaddik, because tzaddik means you do what's right. But so what gets in the way of that? What gets in the way of that? So this is one of those things that gets in the way of that. Yes, if I'm grounded and happy, I can walk a straight line. I can do all of these things as I'm supposed to do them. But when I'm not, I can't. And so that thing of just doing something consistently, just every time I'm faced with a situation, do what you know to be right. So, but why is that such a challenge? But so he was suggesting that if somebody were to be a tzaddik, they would have to have a kind of integration of being. They would have some point come to an integration of their being, so that, and one of the byproducts is that you're capable of consistent behavior, of follow through, consistent behavior, and you're also, yeah.
So I wonder, like you say, it might be that what you think is absolutely right when you made that promise that one day doesn't seem so right. How do you integrate yourself? That's the
right
question.
Well, let's say it's a simple process. Like I remember I once was listening to the Rosh Hashiva of a yeshiva in Beit Vegan called Kol Yaakov. He's Rav Adas. There were a couple brothers that were Rosh Hashivas there. This was Rav Adas. So he was saying, I'm now going to tell you the secret to becoming a great Talmid Chacham. This is the secret. You're hearing it today. You could be a Talmid Chacham, perhaps at the level of the Gaon of Vilna. He's a Sephardic Rosh Hashiva, but he used the Gaon of Vilna. And he said, here it is. I'm telling you. Start with a page of Gemara and learn it until you know it. Then go to the next page. Learn it till you know it. And just keep on doing that. And one day you're going to be a great Talmid Chacham, possibly as great as the Gaon of Vilna. That's all it is. Just start with the first page, learn it till you know it, then go to the next page, learn it till you know it, and just keep on going. Right. So something like that, let's say you have a kind of simple recipe for something, it's not likely you're going to regret it. You know what I mean? It's just, I mean, when you're in your grounded best sense, or what if I told you this simple rule? Everybody you come in contact with this will be your goal. Every time you come in contact with another person, they should be better off for having met you. Now, sometimes you're going to have to think about how to do that, but that's the goal. Every time you meet somebody else, they should be better off having met you. It's unlikely you're going to regret at some point having that goal.
Unless you give everybody your money.
No, so because then it's not.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'm saying, because obviously at some point you have to be educated how to do it. It's not sustainable if it's not sustainable. In other words, you may have to be creative and things, and maybe it's going to have to be about smiling or something like that, because obviously it has to be sustainable. And it has to actually be true that you're actually making their life better. There's a lot of a learning curve that would go into it. But as a central rule, it's not, but so often when I don't follow through on these kind of things, it's sometimes it is a sober reflection about something, and then I realize that it wasn't such a good idea. But that's not the case with many of the things that I am not consistently following through on. So, so this isn't to just to have judgment. This is, to try to understand it and then work with it. That's why I'm thinking about it. I'm not thinking about it as a way of criticism. I'm thinking of it as creative or helpful criticism, but it's criticism. But I'm not thinking of it just for the purpose of criticism. It's to understand how things work. What is I, or who is I? Who am I, or who is I? That was part of what he was reflecting on during that. But this is, for the last couple of years, this is something that I've been trying to work on. And so that was part of it too, is he was right there on something that I've been working on. Again, I don't know if this is just naming something, or if there's, but even naming something could be useful, and even in just talking about it, articulating it. But also the way he was suggesting it would be, Yosef is a model of it. He kept on saying, Yosef, this is the longest, most detailed narrative about an individual. We have Moshe, but he's saying, like, this Moshe's story is not what takes up a lot of the, Moshe's actual story is not as long as Yosef's story, he was suggesting. Nobody else's story is as long as Yosef's story. And he was suggesting that from his perspective, this might be why, because he's modeling something here that really is just very deeply important. His way in the world, because we're not typically focusing on Yosef's way in the world. We think of him as a dreamer, or maybe somebody who annoyed a lot of people and then is trying to figure out how to not annoy a lot of people, or something like that. But we're also getting a lot of other glimpses into why is it important that when he's in Potiphar's house, he does such a good job? Why is it important that when he's in prison, he does such a good job? Why is it important when he's the viceroy, he does such a good job? These are more than just interesting flourishes, literary flourishes. These seem to be something modeled for some reason, and so that's what we want to suggest. So it'll take a while to absorb it. But
Yeah.
anyways, I just really like, and I also like, even in the talking to him afterwards, I could just see this is somebody I'd like to spend more time with. But the chances of that happening, I've noticed there have been people like that where I had this with Lahavdil Abdullah and Tepli, the imam that I had lunch with at Shalit's one time. Like, I even said to him, we're never going to see each other again. Because I knew, and part of it was because I'm not the kind of Jew he needs to be spending time with. He needs to be spending time with Jews who are going to help him, with his work, which was educating imams and other Muslims about another side of Jews in Israel that they could come to admire and like. So that was his thing. And I just accidentally am having lunch with him. And so I knew at that time that I'm having a moment and it's not gonna, I did bring up to him that the next time he comes, we would have him for a weekend, but the likelihood of that is very slim. All right. He does exist on the internet though. Okay, so now the Rambam. That was one thing also, this friend of his, when Rabbi Dweck came back, this friend of his who was standing there goes, what was funny? Because he was telling me that one of the differences between him and Rabbi Sachs is that he's more yeshivish, like his thinking is more out of the world of yeshiva, which Rabbi Sachs was not. And then he looks over to him, he says, speaking of that, this is one of the first times I ever heard you speak where you didn't mention the Rambam. He didn't really mention very many sources. Okay, so our next mitzvah number 14 on our list of positive commandments, that is that he commanded us to make tzitzit, fringes, and that is his maybe exalted saying to make for themselves fringes, let them attach to the fringe at each corner. So this is the end of, it's right after the spies, the Torah portion that has the spies, shlach, which is in Numbers 15, where it talks about tzitzit, and it is the part that we read as the third paragraph of the Shema. And the two colors of strings are not counted as two commandments, even though the main understanding for us is that the blue-purple does not impede the white, and the white does not impede the blue-purple, but there's still one mitzvah. For it is said in the Sifrei, it is possible that there are two commandments. It is possible there are two commandments, the commandment of the white and the commandment of the blue-purple. Hence, we learn to say, that shall be your tzitzit. It is one commandment and not two. Women are not obliged in it, as is explained in the first chapter of Kedushin, which again, that's one of the places that talks about mitzvahs aseh shazman grama, the positive time-bound commandments. Again, tzitzis is one of those positive time-bound commandments. And the regulation of this commandment were explained in the fourth chapter of Menachot. It's sort of funny that it's like in the middle of a text that is all about sacrifice. It's all towards the beginning of the Talmudic tractates that deal with sacrifice. The first one's called Zavachim, which talks about the slaughter of animals, and the next one, which includes all living things that are offered on the Mizbeach and Menachot, are the non-living thing, well, animals or birds that are offered on the altar. And so it's, it's a very technical tractate dealing with grain offerings and etc. And then suddenly you have a discussion of tzitzis, and you have tefillin and mezuzahs over there. So it is interesting that they don't get their own tractate, or at least a few of those mitzvahs together get their own tractate. They do not. They just get sort of put in there. Okay, so that is tzitzis. So he is.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
tzitzis are to be put on a four-cornered garment. Is that
Correct.
right? So do you have to wear a four-cornered garment? And if you don't wear I mean, is it conditional on that, or are you definitely make sure you do wear a four-cornered garment so that you could put tzitzis on?
Right. So I once asked, there was a very significant Talmud Chacham who was one of the rabbis at Itri. I learned at a yeshiva called Itri after high school for 2.5 years. And it was quite remarkable in several ways. One of them was the staff that had been assembled for this place. The Rosh Hashiva of Itri was a very entrepreneurial kind of Rosh Hashiva. His name was Rabbi Mordechai Elephant. And he decided he's going, this was his flagship institution. He had several other yeshivas in different places, but this was his sort of flagship place in Jerusalem. It's called Itri Yerushalayim. And for that place, he decided he is going to try to assemble remarkable Talmidei Chachamim. So one of those was a man by the name of Rabbi Shlomo Fisher, who was just an absolute remarkable Talmud Chacham. And there are several people that were deeply influenced by him in my life. Mordechai Becher was very close to him and deeply influenced by him. And almost every time I have a conversation with Mordechai Becher, even like 2 days ago, I called Mordechai about something, and he laughingly said, Reb Shlomo Fisher actually writes about that. And I said to him, it's like you try to make me feel guilty for not having that sefer. Like Reb Shlomo Fisher's sefer, he quotes it almost every time, and I stubbornly still have not bought it. Beis Yishai, it's called, the sefer. So I once asked Reb Shlomo Fisher, why is it that, because tzitzis makes so much sense. I mean, it's a kind of reminder. It's a kind of macrame reminder of the mitzvot. And there's a meditation related to them, and even the knots and the strings are a kind of meditation. So it's really a remarkable and intuitive kind of mitzvah. And yet it's tied to clothing that went out of style. We don't dress like that anymore. So why would that be? So, I mean, he acknowledged the question, but then he said, the funny thing about Rosh Hashanah Fisher is he was born in Mea Shearim. I don't think he ever left Israel. I'm pretty sure he did not. And he also hardly ever left the Beis Medrash. In fact, he lived in the yeshiva 6 days a week. He only went home to his family on Shabbos. The rest of the time, he was in the yeshiva learning. And by the time we knew him, he had to be already near 50. And he had been doing this for decades. And he's from Mea Shearim. And he has long white beard, and that's how he lives. So you would imagine that that his knowledge would be only Torah. But so whenever he did this, it would be funny. But he said to me, you know how the Queen of England, she has the crown jewels, and these crown jewels are stored for the most part, but every once in a while, there's a ceremony and they use elements from that collection. So when she's inaugurated, they use elements from the collection, or she's married, they use elements from the collection at during times. He says, why is that? He says, why do you think they do that? I mean, because some of these things, they're, as far as they're concerned, they're ancient. They're hundreds and hundreds of years old, and they've been in their family for a long time, and they're connected to history, and they want to connect that to what they're doing. So he said, when you wear your tzitzis and your four-cornered garment, that's what you're doing. Your four-cornered garment itself is a reminder of a time when people used to dress like that. They used to have four-cornered garments, or your talus is a reminder of a time when people used to dress like that. And it's and just because we don't anymore doesn't mean there isn't a value in going out of your way to dress like that. So that was a kind of what we'll call Tamei mitzvahs, like we talked last time. That's reflecting back and coming up with his own explanation, but I sort of liked it. But that is what we do. We go out of our way to wear them, with the talus and the tzitzis, in order to get the benefit of the mitzvah. You actually have to go out of your way to do it, and it's a custom to go out of your way and do it. It's not even rabbinic. The talus during davening, not sure about. The tzitzis, what we call the daled kanfos, or tzitzis, or talus cotton, sometimes they call it. That is custom. That's not even rabbinic law that you're supposed to do it. It's just custom not to walk, more than a certain amount without wearing tzitzis. Once you're wearing it, it's biblical. Because once you're wearing a four-corner garment, now it's biblical. But to get to the point that you're wearing it is custom. Because like you said, if you're not wearing a four-corner garment, then you technically don't need to be wearing tzitzis. So yeah, it is a surprising, there's many elements of surprise about it. The other thing is the Rambam is already anticipating a problem in his explanation here by saying that there is a mitzvah, a separate mitzvah, even if you don't have the blue, you are still fulfilling a biblical commandment. That is not obvious when you look at the text. In the text, it seems like the blue thread is a key. It's an absolute key to the whole fulfillment of the mitzvah. And if you look at the Gemara in Menachos when it talks about it, the focus is on the blue. In fact, if anything, the white might serve as a kind of contrast, a background for the blue. And the blue seems to be the essential element. And if that's the case, without the blue, you might feel like you're not doing the mitzvah. And for like 2,000 years, people did, or whatever, 1,700 years, people were wearing tzitzis without the blue. Now there is blue. There's a question. There was a question over time. There were different suggestions as to what that dye was, but now there are people that are quite convinced they've figured it out. And now you can buy tzitzis with that blue dye, and it seems like we're getting back to, or at least it's possible to get back to what was the original mitzvah. But here he's making it clear that it is two separate mitzvahs, the white threads and the blue threads. And even if you don't have the blue thread, you are still fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis having the white thread. That's what it seems like he's saying here. And he quoted the Sifri as a source for that. I don't know. The Sifri may not. We have to see. The Sifri might be that you might have thought it's two separate mitzvahs, but now you see it's one. And therefore, according to the Sifri, if you don't have the blue, you haven't done it. You haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. But it seems like from him that he holds even without the blue, you have fulfilled the mitzvah. We'll talk more about this because there's some more elements of this. It's really got many branches, this mitzvah. So we'll talk more about this next week. And it may seem to you like I just go out of my way for us not to meet. This is not the case, but we are not meeting on Monday. We're meeting on Tuesday because I'm going to visit my mother in St. Louis and I have to drive back on Monday. So we will regroup on Tuesday. I look forward to meeting with you guys as we look into this further.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Rabbi. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're very welcome. Be well, guys.